Lillian stood by the expansive window of her luxurious Manhattan apartment, gazing out at the vibrant tapestry of autumn. The leaves transformed the streets below into a kaleidoscope of reds, oranges, and yellows, but the beauty of the scene felt distant to her. As she watched the city pulse with life, she felt an unsettling emptiness echoing within her. It was a crisp October morning, yet the sunlight streaming through the glass did little to warm her soul. She was a woman who had once reveled in the thrill of success, her life a whirlwind of high-stakes meetings and lavish parties. But now, following a tumultuous divorce from Nathan, she found herself lost in a sea of introspection. The echoes of their shared laughter and dreams felt like ghosts haunting the corners of her mind. She sighed, brushing a stray hair behind her ear, and turned away from the window. "Maybe I need to do something different," she murmured to herself, her voice barely above a whisper. The silence of the apartment was deafening, and she felt the walls closing in on her. She had everything she could ever want materially, but in her heart, she sensed a void that wealth could not fill. After a moment of contemplation, Lillian made a decision. She would visit the local homeless shelter, a place she had neglected during her rise to the top. Perhaps engaging with those who face struggles far greater than her own would help her gain perspective, provide the purpose she so desperately sought. The shelter was a stark contrast to the opulence of her life. As she stepped inside, the smell of stale coffee and the faint odor of despair greeted her. The atmosphere was heavy, filled with a mixture of hope and hopelessness. A young man behind the counter looked up, his face lighting up with a genuine smile. "Welcome. Can I help you?" he asked, his enthusiasm infectious. Lillian hesitated, feeling out of place among the worn furniture and the weary faces that surrounded her. "I'm here to volunteer," she replied, her voice wavering slightly. "Great. We can always use an extra hand," he said, handing her a clipboard. "Just fill this out, and I'll show you around." As she moved through the shelter, Lillian's heart ached for the residents. She observed a mother cradling her child, a man in a worn jacket sitting quietly in a corner, and a group of individuals sharing stories of hardship. Each story was a reminder of the fragility of life and the unpredictability of fate. But nothing prepared her for what she would soon discover. As she turned a corner, her breath caught in her throat. There, sitting on a weathered couch, was Nathan. He looked different, older, more rugged, but there was a familiarity in his features that sent a rush of memories flooding back. And cradled in his arms was a tiny bundle, a baby boy swaddled in a threadbare blanket. Lillian's heart raced, and her mind spun. "Nathan," she whispered, her voice barely escaping her lips. He looked up, surprise washing over his face as he met her gaze. "Lillian," he said, almost in disbelief, as if he were seeing a ghost. "What are you doing here?" "What am I doing here?" "What are you doing here?" she shot back, her emotions swirling between anger and confusion. Is that our child?" Nathan shifted uncomfortably, glancing down at the baby, whose small face was scrunched up in sleep. "No, this is Samuel." He's not yours," he said, his voice low and hesitant. "Not mine." Lillian echoed incredulously, her heart racing. "Then why on earth are you here with a baby?" He sighed, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "I've been struggling. After everything that happened between us, I lost my way. I came here to get help. And then Claudia, his mother, she needed support. I couldn't just walk away." Lillian felt a wave of emotions crash over her. Memories of their life together flooded her mind, the laughter, the dreams, the love they once shared, all now overshadowed by this stark reality. "You were always so ambitious, Nathan. What happened to you?" "I made choices," he admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "I thought I could handle everything. I thought I could be free." "Free?" Lillian scoffed, incredulously. "You're living in a shelter, holding someone else's child. How is that freedom?" "I'm trying to change," he said, his gaze fierce, yet vulnerable. I'm trying to be someone better. For Samuel. For myself. Lillian's heart softened slightly, and she glanced down at the baby, who was now stirring in Nathan's arms. He's beautiful, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, the tenderness surprising even herself. Thank you, Nathan replied, his eyes gleaming with a mix of pride and sorrow. He's been a light in my life, even in this darkness. Lillian felt a twinge of empathy. The man sitting before her was not the same Nathan she had known. This version was worn down by life's challenges but also touched by a newfound responsibility. What about Claudia? She asked, her curiosity piqued. She's in a tough spot, Nathan admitted, a shadow crossing his face. I try to help her as best as I can, but we're both just trying to survive. Lillian took a step back, her mind racing. The man she once loved was struggling, not just with his own demons but with the weight of a child's future resting on his shoulders. The bitterness she had carried for so long began to dissolve in the face of this new reality. I had no idea, she finally said, her voice softer now. I thought you were living your life without a care in the world. I wish it were that simple, Nathan replied, anguish etched on his features. I didn't want to lose you, Lillian. But I lost myself in the process. For a moment, they stood in silence, the weight of their shared past hanging heavily between them. Lillian looked at the small family Nathan had formed, a mixed bag of emotions swirling within her. Could there still be a part of the man she once loved buried beneath the layers of regret and hardship? Do you need help? She asked suddenly, surprising even herself with the offer. I mean, if you're trying to change, maybe I can assist in some way. Nathan looked taken aback, his expression shifting from shock to cautious hope. You'd do that for me? After everything? Lillian inhaled deeply, her heart pounding in her chest. I don't know what I'm doing, Nathan. But I can't walk away from this. Not when I see what's at stake. As their eyes locked, Lillian felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in a long time, the flicker of connection, the possibility of redemption. She knew that the road ahead would be complicated, but for the first time in months, she felt a glimmer of purpose guiding her path. Let's take it one step at a time, Nathan said, his voice steady. For Samuel. For Samuel, Lillian echoed, feeling an unexpected warmth as she looked at the baby in Nathan's arms. In that moment, the complexities of their past began to intertwine with the threads of a new beginning, one filled with uncertainty but also the potential for healing. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden rays through the windows of the shelter, Lillian found herself standing before Nathan, her ex-husband, a man she had once known so intimately. The sight of him, scruffy and weary, cradling a tiny infant in his arms, sent a rush of conflicting emotions surging through her. She felt as though she had stumbled into a surreal dream, one where her past collided violently with her present. Lillian. Nathan's voice was hoarse, laced with disbelief as he recognized her. His eyes widened, reflecting a mixture of surprise and apprehension. His grip on the baby tightened instinctively, and Lillian noticed the way he leaned protectively over the small child, as if shielding him from the world and from her. What are you doing here, Nathan? Lillian's voice was steadier than she felt, but an undercurrent of anger seeped through. You're supposed to be. Well, wherever you are. Not here. Nathan looked down at the baby, his gaze softening. This is Samuel, he said quietly, pride and sorrow mingling in his voice. He's mine. The name hung in the air, a stark reminder of the life that had once been theirs. Lillian swallowed hard, grappling with the weight of that revelation. You're a father. The question escaped her lips before she could filter it, the disbelief evident in her tone. Yeah, Nathan replied, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't plan on any of this. It just happened. He hesitated, the tension thick between them. I know I'm not the person you remember. I've changed. Changed? Lillian scoffed, shaking her head incredulously. You were supposed to build a life with me, Nathan. Not end up here. Her eyes darted around the shelter, filled with broken dreams and shattered lives, and she felt a pang of guilt for the judgment she harbored. What happened? I lost my way, he admitted, his eyes darkening with the weight of his past. The pressures, the expectations, it all became too much. I turned to things I shouldn't have. I thought I could escape. He paused, glancing at Samuel, who cooed softly, oblivious to the emotional storm brewing around him. But then I found out I was going to be a father. It changed everything. Did it really? Lillian's voice was sharp, masking the concern that lurked beneath. Or is it just another excuse? Lillian, please, he pleaded, his voice breaking slightly. I know I messed up. But I'm trying to do better for him. I want to be the father he deserves. Lillian's heart twisted at the sight of Nathan cradling the baby, the familiar lines of his face softened by a new sense of purpose. And how do you plan to do that living in a place like this? I don't know, Nathan confessed, his shoulders sagging. But I want to find a way. I've been clean for a few months now, and I'm trying to get back on my feet. This place. It's a start. Tension hung in the air as Lillian processed his words. She felt a deep, unsettling mix of sympathy and resentment. You could have reached out to me, she said, her voice steadier now. I would have helped you. We could have worked through this together. I didn't want to drag you down with me, Nathan said, meeting her gaze with a fierce intensity. You had everything: a successful career, a beautiful life. I didn't want to ruin that for you. Lillian let out a bitter laugh, the sound devoid of humor. And living in a shelter with a baby is what? A solution? Better than being on the streets, he shot back, his frustration bubbling to the surface. I'm trying to make something of myself, Lillian. I'm trying to be someone he can look up to. Before she could respond, a soft voice interrupted them. Excuse me, are you Lillian? A young woman approached them, her face flushed with a mix of hope and uncertainty. I'm Claudia. I live here with my son, Lucas. I saw you talking to Nathan and thought I'd introduce myself. Lillian turned her attention to Claudia, noticing the tiredness etched into her features and the way she held a small boy in her arms. Hi, Lillian said, forcing a smile despite the turmoil within her. It's nice to meet you. Claudia glanced at Nathan and then back to Lillian, her expression earnest. I've heard about you. Nathan speaks highly of you. Does he? Lillian raised an eyebrow, her skepticism returning. What exactly does he say? That you're an amazing person, Claudia replied, her voice gentle. He talks about how successful you are and how he wishes he could be more like you. He wants to do right by Samuel, and I can see he's trying. Lillian studied Nathan, who looked both humbled and embarrassed by Claudia's words. I'm just trying to survive, he said, his voice barely audible. But it's hard. I don't want to let anyone down again. Claudia nodded, her eyes shimmering with understanding. I know how that feels. I'm just trying to keep my son out of the system. I want him to have a better life than I did. Lillian felt a pang of empathy for Claudia, who, despite her own struggles, radiated a strength that Lillian found inspiring. What happened to you? She asked gently, hoping to bridge the gap between their worlds. I was in a bad place, Claudia admitted, her voice steady yet filled with emotion. I lost my job, and things spiraled from there. I didn't want to lose Lucas to foster care. So, I came here. Lillian couldn't help but admire the fierce love in Claudia's eyes, the way she clutched her son protectively. You're doing an incredible job, Lillian said, sincerity lacing her words. It takes a lot of courage to fight for your child. Thank you, Claudia replied, her lips curving into a small smile. It's not easy, but I'll do anything for him. As the three of them stood together, Lillian felt a shift within herself. Here they were, bound by their struggles in the shelter, yet fueled by an undeniable determination to forge better lives for their children. She thought of the opportunities she had squandered in her pursuit of success, how easily she had overlooked the value of connection and community. "Maybe I can help," Lillian found herself saying, surprising even herself. "I know people who could assist with resources, donations. Anything that might help the shelter." Nathan's eyes widened, a flicker of hope igniting. "You would do that?" "Why not?" Lillian shrugged, her heart racing. "I've been searching for purpose. Maybe this is it." Claudia beamed at her, and for the first time in a long while, Lillian felt a spark of optimism. "Thank you," she said, her voice full of gratitude. "You don't know how much this means to us." As Lillian stood there, surrounded by the complexities of her past and the warmth of newfound connections, she realized that perhaps, just perhaps, she could be a part of something greater. In that moment, the layers of her former life began to peel away, revealing a path toward redemption and renewal that she had never anticipated. As the sun filtered through the windows of the shelter, casting warm, golden rays on the worn-out floor, Lillian felt a mix of emotions swirling within her. She had come to this place, initially seeking to fulfill a sense of obligation, to check off a box in her quest for meaning after her tumultuous divorce from Nathan. Yet, standing there, watching the lives of those around her, she was struck by the stark reality that enveloped them. Each face told a story of struggle, resilience, and an unyielding desire for connection. Her gaze landed on Nathan, who was sitting cross-legged on the floor, cradling a tiny bundle in his arms. The baby, no more than a few weeks old, was swaddled in a faded blanket. Nathan's eyes, once filled with a mix of ambition and restlessness, now held a softness that Lillian had never seen before. He looked up and caught her gaze, a fleeting moment of recognition passing between them. The walls that had been built up over the years seemed to tremble in that instant. "Lillian," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, as if afraid to shatter the fragile atmosphere. She stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. "Nathan, what are you doing here?" The question escaped her lips before she could temper her tone. There was an edge of disbelief in her voice, a mix of anger and curiosity. He sighed, glancing down at the sleeping infant. I'm trying to make things right. This is Samuel." He gently tapped the baby's nose, eliciting a soft coo that made Lillian's heart ache in a way she hadn't anticipated. "Samuel," she echoed, the name rolling off her tongue like a forgotten memory. "He's your son." Nathan nodded, his expression shifting from trepidation to a flicker of pride. "I wasn't planning on this, Lillian. But when Claudia found out she was pregnant, everything changed." "Claudia?" Lillian's brow furrowed, the name unfamiliar, yet heavy with implications. "She's a resident here. A young mother, just like I was once. She needed help, and I thought I could be there for her this time," Nathan explained, his voice steady despite the vulnerability that hung in the air. "I didn't want to repeat the mistakes I made with you." Lillian felt her heart twist. She had come to the shelter with a sense of righteous indignation, armed with judgment and preconceived notions. Yet, facing Nathan in this moment, with a newborn in his arms, she felt the ground shift beneath her. Memories of their life together flooded her mind, the laughter, the dreams, and ultimately, the pain that had driven them apart. "I don't understand," she finally managed, her voice trembling slightly. "How did you end up here?" Nathan looked away, his gaze distant as if he were peering into a past that haunted him. "After we separated, I lost my way. The freedom I thought I wanted turned into a prison of its own. I fell into addiction, Lillian. It consumed me." He paused, searching her eyes for understanding. "I pushed everyone away, including you." Lillian swallowed hard, anger bubbling beneath the surface. "You could have reached out. You could have tried to fix things instead of running away." "I know," he replied, his voice thick with regret. "But I was ashamed. I didn't want you to see me like this, to witness my downfall." You deserved better. A silence enveloped them, heavy and suffocating. Lillian's mind raced as she wrestled with the revelations. The Nathan she had known, the ambitious, daring man who had vowed to conquer the world, was now a shadow of that person, weighed down by his choices and the burden of responsibility. "Is this what you want now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "To be a father?" "I want to try," he said, sincerity etched in every syllable. "I want to give Samuel what I didn't have a chance at, a better life. I want to be there for him." "Do you even know how to be a father?" The question slipped out, sharp and unyielding, as if Lillian were trying to peel back the layers of Nathan's newfound resolve. "I'm learning," he admitted, a hint of desperation creeping into his tone. "I'm still figuring it out. But I'm here, in this shelter, trying to make a difference. I've been given a second chance, and I can't let it slip through my fingers." Lillian's heart ached for him, caught in a web of conflicting emotions. She wanted to be angry, to lash out at the man who had shattered her dreams, yet she saw something in him that was undeniably different, a flicker of hope, perhaps, or a glimmer of the man she had once loved. "Claudia," she began, the name lingering in the air. "What about her? Are you too?" "No, it's not like that," Nathan interjected quickly, his eyes widening. "I'm not in love with her. She needed help, and I wanted to be there for Samuel. That's all there is to it." Lillian felt a knot form in her stomach. The thought of Nathan with another woman, taking on a fatherly role, ignited a fire of jealousy she hadn't expected. "So you're just going to play the role of the hero, then? What about us?" "Us?" Nathan echoed, his voice a mixture of confusion and yearning. "Lillian, don't." She held up a hand, cutting him off. "I can't do this right now. You've made your choices, and I've made mine. You left me, Nathan. You can't just waltz back into my life with a baby and expect everything to be fine." "I know I can't," he replied, his voice low and pleading. "But seeing you here, in this place, it's making me realize how much I've lost. I want to change, Lillian. I want to be better for Samuel, and for myself." As Nathan spoke, Lillian felt the weight of his words press down on her. The flicker of hope she had seen in him was now a blazing flame, illuminating the shadows of their shared past. She could see the struggle etched on his face, the battle between the man he used to be and the father he aspired to become. "Change isn't easy, Nathan. It takes time," she said, her voice softening. "You can't just throw yourself into this and expect everything to be perfect." "I know," he replied, his expression earnest. "But I'm willing to fight for it. For Samuel. For a chance at redemption." Lillian looked down at the baby in his arms, a small being caught in the crossfire of their complicated history. The innocence in his tiny face stirred something deep within her, a maternal instinct that had long been dormant. She felt a swell of compassion for Nathan, a realization that perhaps they were both victims of their choices, navigating the turbulent waters of life together. "I don't want to lose you again, Lillian," Nathan said, his voice breaking slightly. "I know I messed up, but I need you in my life. Can we at least try to figure this out together?" The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Lillian felt her heart race, torn between the remnants of her anger and the flicker of hope ignited by Nathan's sincerity. Could they truly rebuild what had been lost, or were they simply chasing shadows of a past that could never be reclaimed? "I don't know, Nathan," she finally replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need time to think." He nodded, understanding etched on his face. "I'll be here, whenever you're ready." As she turned to leave, Lillian stole one last glance at Nathan and the baby. In that moment, she saw not just the man who had broken her heart but a father trying to mend his own. The path ahead was uncertain, but perhaps, just perhaps, it was one worth exploring together. Lillian stood in her expansive apartment, the golden light of the autumn sun pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the polished hardwood floors. The vibrant colors of the leaves outside mirrored her complex feelings, beautiful yet fleeting, a reminder of the changes she had endured in her life. She had once believed that wealth equated to happiness, but as she stared at the view of the bustling streets of New York City, she felt an overwhelming emptiness within her. The waves of nostalgia washed over her, and she found herself reflecting on her recent divorce from Nathan, the man she had once loved fiercely. Despite the opulence surrounding her, Lillian felt lost. It was as if she were floating in an ocean of luxury but unable to find solid ground. The more she tried to fit into her new life as a single millionaire, the more she felt like a stranger to herself. She had spent countless nights attending galas and charity events, all in an attempt to fill the void that Nathan's departure had left in her soul. But as the wind rustled the leaves outside, she knew she needed something different, something real. That was why she found herself at the homeless shelter that day, an act of rebellion against her previous life of superficiality. As she entered the building, she was struck by the stark contrast between her world and that of the people inside. The air was thick with the scent of cooking food and an underlying sadness that seemed to hang like a heavy curtain. Lillian had come with the intention of donating and perhaps volunteering her time, hoping to find some meaning in helping those less fortunate than herself. As she walked through the shelter, her heart ached for the stories hidden behind each weary face. She approached a group of women, one of whom was cradling a small child. Their laughter was a bittersweet melody, a reminder that joy could still exist even in the harshest of circumstances. Lillian took a moment to interact with them, her heart swelling with empathy. Then, as she turned a corner, she froze. There, sitting on a worn-out bench, was Nathan. He was holding a tiny, swaddled baby. The sight of him sent a jolt through her system, and she felt her breath hitch in her throat. Her mind raced as she tried to reconcile the man who had once been her husband with the image before her, a man who now looked rugged and worn, yet tender as he gently rocked the baby in his arms. "Lillian." His voice was hoarse, and he looked up, surprise and confusion mingling in his eyes. "What are you doing here, Nathan?" she managed to choke out, her heart pounding as she took a step closer. "Who is this baby?" He looked down at the infant, a soft smile breaking through the weariness etched on his face. "This is Samuel. He's mine." The world around her darkened as a surge of memories flooded back, memories of love, laughter, and ultimately, betrayal. "What happened to you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "How did it come to this?" Nathan sighed deeply, his fingers brushing over the baby's cheek. "Life happened, Lillian. I lost my way after everything between us fell apart. I thought I could find freedom, but it led me down a dark path. I got caught up in my own demons." He hesitated, as if weighing his words carefully. "But then Claudia came into my life. She was lost too, and we found each other. Samuel is our light." Lillian felt a rush of conflicting emotions: anger, sadness, and a strange sense of understanding. "You chose to leave me, Nathan. You left everything behind. And now you're here, with a baby?" "I know it doesn't make sense," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "But I'm trying to make things right. I want to be a father to Samuel, even if it means starting from scratch here at the shelter." The weight of their past hung heavily in the air, and Lillian felt as if she were standing at the edge of a chasm, unsure of how to proceed. The man she had once loved was still there, but he was different, haunted by the choices he had made. "And what about your life? What about us?" she asked, her heart aching at the thought of what had been lost. He looked up at her, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I can't change what happened, Lillian. But I don't want to run away anymore. I want to face my mistakes and rebuild my life. Maybe we can find a way to work together, to help each other." Just then, a young woman approached them, a weary but determined figure with a fierce glint in her eyes. "Nathan. You need to keep an eye on Samuel. He's getting fussy," she said, her voice laced with urgency. Lillian watched as Nathan's face lit up with affection. "This is Claudia," he said, motioning to the woman. "She's been incredible. We're both trying to do our best for him." Claudia extended her hand toward Lillian, her expression softening. "I've heard so much about you. Nathan talks about you often. I know things are complicated, but he's trying to be a good father. We both are." Lillian shook Claudia's hand, her heart heavy with mixed emotions. I don't understand how this happened." Claudia smiled gently. "Life is messy, isn't it? We all make choices, and sometimes those choices lead us to unexpected places. But we can't let those choices define us forever." Lillian felt a flicker of understanding in Claudia's words. Here she was, sitting in a shelter, speaking to two people whose lives had taken a turn she could hardly fathom. The complexities of human relationships were baffling, and yet, there was a sense of connection forming among them. "I'm trying to help," Lillian said, her voice steadying. "I want to do something meaningful. I thought I could make a difference here." Claudia's eyes sparkled with hope. "That's exactly what we need. Support, kindness, and compassion. The world can be so cold, but together, we can create a little warmth." As Lillian listened to Claudia's earnest words, she felt a shift within herself. Maybe this was the purpose she had been searching for, a way to connect with others, to rebuild her own identity through acts of compassion, rather than through wealth and status. She had been so focused on her pain and loss that she had failed to see the potential for growth and healing in the lives of others. "I'd like to help," Lillian said firmly, her resolve solidifying. "I want to volunteer my time, do whatever I can to support this shelter and the families here." Nathan's eyes widened with gratitude, and Claudia beamed at her. "That would mean the world to us, Lillian. We could use all the help we can get." Lillian nodded, a newfound determination igniting within her. As she stood in that shelter, surrounded by people who had fought their own battles, she realized that her life didn't have to be defined by her past or her wealth. Instead, it could be shaped by the connections she forged and the love she shared. Little did she know that this decision would lead her down a path of self-discovery, one that would challenge her beliefs and force her to confront the complexities of her relationship with Nathan and the family they had never truly had. Yet, in that moment, she felt a sense of hope, a glimmer of a future where healing and redemption might just be possible. Lillian stood in the middle of her apartment, still decorated with remnants of her life before the divorce. The sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the expensive artwork and plush furnishings that now felt more like a cage than a sanctuary. She glanced at the city skyline, her mind heavy with thoughts of what could have been. The vibrant colors of the autumn leaves painted a stark contrast to the dull ache in her heart. It had been weeks since her visit to the shelter, and the faces of the people she met there haunted her thoughts, especially Nathan's. With a sudden resolve, she grabbed her phone and typed out a quick message to her assistant. "I need help organizing a donation drive for the shelter. Please schedule a meeting with the team." Her fingers hovered over the screen, contemplating the extent of her involvement. It was time to act, not just as a benefactor but as someone who could make a difference. The following Saturday, Lillian found herself at the shelter again, armed with bags filled with clothes, canned goods, and toys. The familiar smell of detergent mixed with the earthy scent of the outside air greeted her as she stepped inside. The room was buzzing with activity, volunteers sorted donations while others prepared meals. She felt a warmth spread through her as she realized she was part of something bigger than herself. "Lillian," a voice called out, breaking her reverie. It was Claudia, the young mother she had spoken to during her last visit. Claudia's face lit up with a smile that radiated strength and resilience, despite the challenges she faced. She approached Lillian with a toddler on her hip and an outstretched hand. "Thank you for coming back. We really need help, especially with the upcoming winter." Lillian's heart swelled as she handed Claudia a couple of bags. "I brought some clothes and supplies. I hope they help." "Oh, they will. You have no idea how much this means to us, Claudia replied, her eyes glistening with gratitude. Lucas has outgrown most of his things, and I can't afford to buy new ones. Let me know if there's anything else you need, Lillian said, feeling a sense of purpose she thought she had lost forever. As they chatted, Lillian learned more about Claudia's life. It's been tough since I lost my job, Claudia explained, brushing a strand of hair out of her face. I'm trying to keep things together for Lucas. He deserves a good life, away from the system. Lillian nodded, empathy flooding her senses. I can't imagine how hard that must be. But you're doing an amazing job. He's lucky to have you. Claudia smiled softly, her expression a mix of hope and worry. Some days I feel strong, but others. I just don't know how I'll make it. Lillian's heart ached for Claudia. She was reminded of her own struggles, the loneliness that seemed to shadow her even in a crowded room. You're not alone, she said firmly. I want to help. Maybe we can set up some kind of support network here. Bring together some resources for the families. Claudia's eyes widened. Really? You do that? Absolutely, Lillian replied, her voice steady. I have connections and resources that could be beneficial. We can create a community. Thank you, Lillian, Claudia said, her voice barely above a whisper. You don't know how much this means to me and to everyone here. As the day progressed, Lillian found herself deeply engrossed in the activities at the shelter. She helped organize the donations, sorting clothes by size and age, and even assisted in preparing a meal for the families. The laughter of children and the vibrant energy of the volunteers wrapped around her like a warm blanket, easing the heaviness that had settled in her heart. Later, as the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the room, Lillian took a moment to step outside for some fresh air. She leaned against the railing, watching as the leaves danced in the breeze. The serenity was short-lived, however, as Nathan's presence suddenly filled her senses. He stood a few feet away, cradling Samuel against his chest. Nathan, she said, her heart skipping a beat. He looked different, more grounded, but there was a weariness in his eyes that tugged at her heartstrings. Lillian, he replied, his voice low and cautious. Didn't expect to see you here. I'm trying to help, she said, glancing down at Samuel, who was peacefully asleep in Nathan's arms. I brought some donations. His gaze softened as he looked at their son. He's been a handful, but I'm doing my best. Lillian felt a rush of emotions. You're doing a good job. I see the way you care for him. Nathan shrugged, a hint of vulnerability creeping into his demeanor. I'm just trying to make up for my past mistakes. I never wanted to end up like this, you know. I can't imagine how hard it's been for you, Lillian said, her voice barely above a whisper. But seeing you here, taking care of Samuel. It's different. Yeah, it's different, he agreed, looking away as if the weight of his past was too heavy to bear. I'm not the same person I was when we were together. I've had to face a lot of demons. Lillian took a deep breath, feeling the pull of old feelings mixed with new understanding. We all have our battles, Nathan. I've had my share too. Nathan looked back at her, his eyes searching hers for something. I don't want to drag you down with me. You have a life success, stability. I'm just trying to survive. You're not just surviving, Nathan. You're a father now, Lillian said, her voice firm. And you're doing a remarkable job. He let out a small laugh, but it was tinged with bitterness. Remarkable? I'm living in a shelter, Lillian. Yes, but you're here for him. You're fighting for him. That's what matters, she insisted, stepping closer. You're not alone in this. I want to help you. Nathan's expression shifted, a flicker of hope mingling with skepticism. Help? How? Let's work together on a project for the shelter. We can create something that will benefit families like yours, like Claudia's, she suggested, her heart racing at the thought of collaborating with him once more. Claudia? His brow furrowed in confusion. She's a single mother here, Lillian explained. She's struggling but has so much strength. I believe we can create a support network to help families like hers. Nathan considered her words, the tension between them palpable. You really want to do this? More than anything, she replied earnestly. For Samuel, for Claudia, for everyone here. And, maybe, for us too. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with oranges and purples, Nathan's expression softened. I don't want to get your hopes up. I can't promise anything. You don't have to promise me anything, Nathan. Just be present. That's a start, she said, feeling a newfound determination. The connection between them felt different now, layered with complexities neither had anticipated. Lillian found herself smiling, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. Thank you, Lillian. I didn't expect this, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Neither did I, she admitted, her heart racing as she realized how much she had missed this feeling of camaraderie, of connection. As they stood together, surrounded by the chaos of the shelter, something shifted between them. It was a fragile moment, filled with the potential for healing and understanding. And as Lillian watched Nathan rock Samuel in his arms, she felt a glimmer of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, they could forge a new path together, one that intertwined their lives and the lives of those around them in a meaningful way. Lillian stepped into the shelter once more, her heart a mix of anticipation and unease. It had become a sanctuary of sorts for her, a place where she confronted the most profound parts of herself she had long ignored. Each visit peeled back layers of her past, revealing feelings she had buried after her tumultuous divorce from Nathan. The air was thick with the scent of hope and despair, and she found herself drawn to the familiar corners of the space that had become a backdrop to her revelations. As she approached the small room where Nathan often spent his time, she could hear the soft cooing of the baby he cared for, a sound that both soothed and unsettled her. The sight of him was still jarring. The man who had once shared her life was now navigating a world far removed from the one they once inhabited together. He looked different, a shadow of the man she had once loved fiercely. But today, there was something else in his eyes, a flicker of vulnerability that intrigued her. Hey, Nathan, she said, her voice trembling slightly as she stepped into the room. He looked up, surprise washing over his features as he cradled the tiny bundle in his arms. Samuel, as she had learned the baby was named, gazed up at her with wide, innocent eyes. Lillian, he replied, the name rolling off his tongue like a bittersweet memory. I didn't expect to see you here again. His tone was cautious, a hint of wariness creeping in as he shifted the baby to one arm and stood up. I can't stay away, she admitted, her gaze locked on Samuel. He's beautiful. The softness in her voice surprised even her. She had come to terms with her feelings for Nathan and the complexity of their past, but seeing him with a child stirred emotions she thought she had buried. Yeah, he is, Nathan said, pride swelling in his chest as he looked down at the baby. He's my reason for trying to change. The weight of his words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken history. Change? Lillian echoed, her brow furrowing. You mean you want to change your life? Nathan nodded, his expression becoming somber. I've made a lot of mistakes, Lillian. I lost myself in so many ways. But when I hold him, it's like I can breathe again. I want to be better for him. Lillian felt a pang in her chest as she watched him. This was a side of Nathan she had never seen before, this tender, earnest desire to be a father. I never thought I'd see you like this, she murmured. We were both lost, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. I thought I needed freedom, but I just ended up in chains of my own making. He looked her in the eyes, and she could see the struggle etched on his face. I hurt you, Lillian. I'm sorry. The apology hung in the air, a fragile bridge between their past and present. Lillian's heart raced as she considered his words. You think saying sorry makes it all better? She asked, a touch of bitterness creeping in. You left me when I needed you the most. I know, he said, his voice cracking with emotion. I was weak. I thought I could handle it all on my own, but the truth is, I couldn't. I'm still fighting those demons. Lillian took a deep breath, feeling the tension in the room shift. You're not alone anymore, she said softly, surprising even herself with her openness. You have Samuel now. He needs you. I know that, Nathan replied, his gaze unwavering. But what if I fail him too? What if I can't be the father he deserves? Lillian's heart ached for him. You have to try, Nathan. You can't run away from this. You have to face it. She stepped closer, her resolve strengthening. Just like I have to face my own choices. Nathan ran a hand through his unkempt hair, frustration evident in his features. I don't want to drag you into my mess, Lillian. You deserve so much more than this. Maybe I'm tired of the more, she shot back, her voice firm. I want something real. I want to help. His gaze softened, confusion flickering in his eyes. Help? How can you help me? You live in a different world. Maybe that's the point, she replied, her heart racing. I can help you find your way back. We can work together. Nathan hesitated, a storm of emotions raging within him. I don't want to drag you down with me. I've been to hell and back, Lillian. I don't want you to see me like this. I need to see you like this, she said, her voice steady. I can't pretend the past didn't happen. But I can help you build a new future. We both deserve that. A silence enveloped them, thick with a shared understanding. Nathan glanced down at Samuel, who was beginning to fuss in his arms. You make it sound so easy, he said softly. What if I fall again? Then we pick you up, she answered, her heart resolute. It's not about perfection, it's about trying. You're not alone in this. You never were. She stepped even closer, her heart pounding as she reached out to touch the baby's tiny hand. He looked at her, his expression shifting from uncertainty to something deeper. I never stopped loving you, you know, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. But I thought you were better off without me. Lillian's breath hitched at his confession, the weight of his words crashing over her. Nathan, he interrupted her, his voice urgent. I messed up, Lillian. I wanted to be the man you deserved, but I was too caught up in my own demons. I still am. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes as she searched his face, wanting to believe in the man standing before her. You have to believe in yourself, Nathan. It starts there. He nodded slowly, processing her words. You really think I can do this? I do, she said firmly. And I'll be right here with you. We can work through this together, like we once did. Nathan's eyes glistened with unshed tears, the weight of his past and present colliding in a moment of clarity. Thank you, Lillian. I don't deserve your kindness, but I want to try. For Samuel, and for us. Her heart soared as she realized the magnitude of what they were beginning to rebuild. You're not just trying for Samuel. You're trying for yourself, too. We all deserve a second chance, Nathan. A silence fell between them, but it was no longer heavy with uncertainty. Instead, it was filled with a fragile hope, a promise of healing that she hadn't dared to dream of just days before. She reached for his hand, surprised at how natural it felt to touch him again. As they stood there, connected through their shared past and the glimmer of a shared future, Lillian understood that the road ahead would not be easy. But for the first time, she felt a sense of purpose lighting the way. Together, they could face the shadows, one step at a time. The crisp autumn air filled the community room of the shelter as Lillian and Nathan gathered with a small group of volunteers. The room, usually dim and dreary, had been transformed into a workspace buzzing with creativity and purpose. Colorful posters hung on the walls, and tables were strewn with art supplies, paint, and various materials for the upcoming revitalization project. Lillian glanced around, taking in the energy of the room, and felt a rush of excitement mixed with nervousness. This was their first big project together since they had reunited, and she wanted it to be perfect. "Are you ready for this?" Nathan's voice broke her reverie. He stood beside her, a slight smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. His hands were stained with paint, evidence of his eagerness to dive into the work. Lillian chuckled softly, more than ready. "I just hope we can make a difference." She paused, her heart swelling as she observed the group of volunteers, many of whom were residents of the shelter. "Look at everyone. They're so invested in this. It's amazing." Nathan nodded, his gaze following hers. "It is. You know, I never thought I'd be doing something like this again. It feels meaningful." Lillian turned to him, her eyes searching his face for any hint of the man she had known before their separation. She found something different in him, an openness, a vulnerability that hadn't been there before. "I'm glad we're doing this together," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. As the two began to lay out plans for the children's play area, the atmosphere shifted to one of collaboration. They divided the tasks among the volunteers, some would paint murals, while others would build playground equipment. Lillian found herself working closely with Nathan, their shoulders brushing as they moved the tables and chairs to create more space. "Nathan," she began tentatively, "how do you feel about everything? About being here, about us?" He paused, his expression turning serious. "It's complicated. I mean, I never expected to see you again, especially not like this. But I'm grateful. You're really doing something incredible for these kids. And for you too," she added, a hint of challenge in her tone. "You're a part of this now. I want you to know that." He met her gaze, and for a moment, the world around them faded away. "I want to be a part of it, Lillian. I want to be better. For Samuel, for you, for everything." Lillian felt a warmth spread through her chest at the mention of their son. "I want that too," she replied softly. "I want us to be a family again." As the day progressed, they worked side by side, laughter echoing in the room as they painted bright colors and whimsical designs on the walls. Lillian felt exhilarated, not just by the project but by the connection they were rebuilding. "Look at this," she exclaimed, holding up a brush covered in vibrant blue paint. "This is going to be the sky for our mural. We should add some clouds." "Yeah, and maybe a giant sun," Nathan suggested, his enthusiasm infectious. "You know, to brighten this place up." As they painted together, they shared stories of their lives since their separation. Lillian spoke about her struggles with loneliness and the emptiness that had consumed her after the divorce. Nathan opened up about his battles, the darkness he had faced, and the small victories he had achieved since entering the shelter. "I've made mistakes," he admitted, his voice heavy with emotion. "But I'm trying to turn things around. I want to be a good father to Samuel, and I want to earn your trust again." Lillian felt a rush of compassion wash over her. "You are trying, Nathan. That's what matters. We all make mistakes. It's how we choose to move forward that defines us." Their conversation was interrupted by Claudia, the young mother they had met during their earlier visits. She walked in with a determined look on her face, holding a clipboard and a stack of papers. "Hey, guys. I've been working on a proposal for the play area project. I think we should include some educational elements like a small reading nook with books for the kids." Lillian's eyes lit up. "Claudia, that's a brilliant idea. We can create a corner where kids can read and learn." Nathan chimed in, "And we can have volunteers help with story time. I can read to the kids. It'll be fun." Claudia grinned, visibly excited. "Exactly. We can make it a safe space for them to explore their imagination." And maybe even have some art supplies there too. As they brainstormed ideas, Lillian felt a renewed sense of purpose. She looked at Nathan and Claudia, realizing they were building something beautiful together, something that transcended their pasts. Later that day, as they took a break, Lillian found herself sitting across from Nathan at a small table, a cup of coffee in hand. She could sense the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air. "Nathan," she said, breaking the silence, "I need to ask you something. Do you think we can really make this work? Us, I mean." He leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "I want to believe we can. But it's going to take time, and it's going to be hard. We both have a lot to overcome." "I know," she replied, her voice steady. "But I believe in second chances. Look at us, here we are, working together for something bigger than ourselves. It feels right." His gaze softened, and for a fleeting moment, she saw a flicker of hope in his eyes. "You're right. I never thought I'd have this chance. Not just with you, but to make a difference. It's like I'm finally finding my way back." As they spoke, the tension that had once defined their relationship began to dissipate. They were not just two people with a troubled past, they were partners working toward a shared future. The next few weeks saw them immersed in the project, the children's laughter and the vibrant colors of the murals transforming the shelter into a place of joy and hope. Lillian and Nathan's connection deepened as they navigated the challenges together, facing the scrutiny of others but finding strength in each other. One afternoon, as they were painting a mural of a large tree with colorful leaves, Nathan paused to watch Lillian. She was focused, her brow furrowed in concentration as she carefully added detail to a branch. "Lillian," he said, breaking the silence. "I know we've both been through a lot, but I want you to know that I see you. The person you are now. You're amazing." She looked up, surprise etched on her face. "Thank you, Nathan. That means a lot to me. I'm just trying to find my way, just like you." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a soft whisper. "I don't want to lose you again. I'm terrified of messing this up. Just take it one day at a time," she urged, her heart racing at the proximity between them. "We're both learning. Let's focus on what we can create together." With every brushstroke and every laugh shared, they built a new foundation for their relationship. The project became a symbol of their commitment to each other, to their son, and to the community they were now a part of. As the sun set on another day of hard work, Lillian wiped her hands on her apron and glanced at Nathan. "We're really doing this," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "Yeah, we are," he replied, a smile breaking across his face. "And I wouldn't want to do it with anyone else." In that moment, they stood together, the weight of their shared history behind them, ready to embrace whatever the future held. The bright autumn sun filtered through the large windows of the shelter, casting a warm glow on the preparations for the fundraising event. Lillian stood in front of a large bulletin board, her fingers lightly tracing over colorful flyers that advertised the upcoming night of hope and support. She felt a surge of purpose as she organized the materials, her heart swelling with pride for the community that had become a part of her life in recent weeks. "Lillian, can you help me with these tables?" Nathan called out from the other side of the room, balancing a stack of plastic chairs in his arms. His voice, once familiar and comforting, now held an edge of determination that made her heart race. She turned, taking in the sight of him, his hair slightly tousled, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. He looked different, almost revitalized, and she couldn't help but admire how he had embraced his role at the shelter. "Of course," she replied, her voice bright. She moved toward him, her heart beating faster with each step. As they worked side by side, arranging chairs and tables, the air between them crackled with an unspoken tension. She could feel the warmth radiating from his presence, and it both thrilled and terrified her. After everything they had been through, could they really be standing here together, working towards something meaningful? "Do you think we'll have enough seating?" Nathan asked, glancing over the rows of chairs they had set up. I mean, I hope people will come out to support us. Lillian nodded, her mind racing with thoughts of all the people she had reached out to. I think so. I've sent invitations to everyone I know. If they care about the community, they'll show up. She paused, trying to gauge his reaction. And it's a good cause, Nathan. We're really making a difference here. He looked at her, his expression serious. You're making a difference, Lillian. I'm just trying to keep up. There was a vulnerability in his voice that struck her. She could see he was still grappling with his past, and the weight of it hung in the air like an uninvited guest. Don't sell yourself short. You've been incredible with the kids, Lillian reassured him, her eyes sparkling with sincerity. I've seen how they light up when you're around. You have a gift. Nathan chuckled softly, running a hand through his hair. I'm just trying to be a decent human being. It's harder than it looks sometimes. He paused, looking out at the bustling shelter, filled with laughter and chatter. But it feels good to be part of something again. Lillian's heart swelled at his words. She wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap that had formed between them during their tumultuous past. You've always had it in you, Nathan. I just think you're finally starting to see it. As they continued to set up, they shared stories and laughter, the comfortable rhythm of their conversations slowly easing the tension that had lingered between them. Lillian found herself drawn to him, not just as her ex-husband but as a man who had faced his demons and emerged with a renewed sense of purpose. Later, as they took a break and leaned against the wall, catching their breath, Nathan looked over at her, his expression earnest. You know, I've been thinking a lot about the mistakes I made in the past. How I hurt you, how I let you down. I wish I could take it all back. Lillian's breath caught in her throat. This was the moment she had both anticipated and dreaded. Nathan, we can't change the past, she said gently. But we can choose how we move forward. His gaze bore into hers, and she could see the flicker of hope in his eyes. I want to move forward, Lillian. With you. But I don't want to hurt you again. She felt a rush of warmth at his words, but the fear of vulnerability clawed at her heart. I want that too, but we have to be careful. We can't rush into things without addressing what happened between us. He nodded, his brow furrowing slightly. You're right. I don't want to lose you again. I've been through a lot, and you've been my anchor through all of this. Lillian swallowed hard, her heart racing. You're not going to lose me, Nathan. I'm here, and I want to help you. We can do this together. Just as their conversation began to deepen, Claudia approached them, her bright eyes reflecting a mix of excitement and anxiety. Hey, guys. I just wanted to thank you for everything you've done. I'm really nervous about tonight. Lillian smiled at her, grateful for the interruption. You're going to be amazing, Claudia. Just remember, everyone is here to support us. I know, but what if no one shows up? Or what if they don't like what we've prepared? Claudia's voice trembled slightly, and Lillian could see the weight of expectation resting on her shoulders. Nathan stepped forward, offering his encouragement. Claudia, you've worked so hard on this. The food and decorations are beautiful. You've put your heart into this event, and that's what matters. People will appreciate that. Claudia's shoulders relaxed a fraction, and she smiled shyly. Thanks, Nathan. I just really want this to work out for Lucas. He deserves a better life. Lillian's heart ached at the mention of Lucas, the little boy who had captured her heart during her visits to the shelter. You're doing everything you can for him, Claudia. And that's what counts. Just focus on the love you're giving him. As they talked, the atmosphere in the shelter began to shift, more volunteers arriving, laughter filling the air, and the scent of food wafting through the hall. Lillian felt a growing sense of excitement. This event was more than just a fundraiser, it was a celebration of community, hope, and the resilience of the human spirit. With the event only hours away, Lillian and Nathan found themselves in the back room, preparing the final touches. The walls were adorned with colorful decorations, and the tables were set with care. "Do you think we should add more lights?" Nathan asked, adjusting a string of fairy lights that hung above their heads. "I want it to feel warm and welcoming." Lillian stepped back, tilting her head to assess his work. "I think it looks perfect. But if you want to add more, go for it." She watched as he climbed on a chair, his movements filled with purpose. "Okay, just one more strand," he said with determination. "I want everyone to feel the warmth of this place tonight." Lillian smiled, a sense of admiration washing over her. "You really care about this, don't you? About the people here?" "More than I ever thought possible," he replied, glancing down at her, his eyes shining with sincerity. "It's strange how life can turn around, right? Not long ago, I didn't know if I could ever feel this way again." Lillian stepped closer, her heart racing as she met his gaze. "I feel it too," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "There's something special about what's happening, about what we're building here." Nathan paused, the air between them thick with possibility. "I wanted to tell you earlier, but I've been scared. I didn't want to make things awkward." "What is it?" she prompted, her heart hammering in anticipation. He took a deep breath, his expression earnest. "I think I'm falling for you again, Lillian. Every day we spend together, I feel this connection growing stronger. But I don't want to rush things. I want to make sure we're both ready." Lillian's breath caught in her throat. She had felt the same way, but to hear him say it aloud sent a rush of emotions through her. "I have feelings for you too, Nathan. But we need to take it slow. We owe it to ourselves to heal and build a solid foundation." "Agreed," he said, a smile breaking through the seriousness of the moment. "No pressure, just. Let's see where this takes us." And as they stood there, surrounded by the sense of hope and the promise of a brighter future, Lillian felt a renewed sense of purpose. Perhaps, just perhaps, they were on the brink of something beautiful, a second chance to rewrite their story amidst the laughter of children and the warmth of the community that had embraced them both. The evening air was warm, filled with laughter and the soft notes of a jazz band serenading the guests at the fundraising event for the shelter. Lillian stood amidst the crowd, a radiant smile on her face as she mingled with familiar and new faces alike. She had worked tirelessly to organize this event, pulling in favors and donations from her network of high-profile contacts. The shelter, once a shadow in her life, was now the center of her universe, a place where she had found purpose and connection. As the night progressed, Lillian felt a surge of pride watching Nathan engage with the families at the shelter. He had transformed since she had first seen him there, the weight of his past still lingering but softened by the light of hope that now shone in his eyes. Lillian moved through the crowd, exchanging pleasantries, but her gaze frequently drifted back to Nathan, who was speaking to a group of children, his laughter infectious. Just then, a familiar figure emerged from the shadows, and the lively atmosphere shifted. It was Mark, an old friend of Nathan's from his previous life, a life filled with reckless abandon and poor choices. Lillian's heart sank as she watched Mark approach Nathan, a smirk plastered across his face, as if he held a secret that could unravel everything. "Hey, Nate!" Mark called out, his voice cutting through the music. Lillian tensed, sensing trouble. Nathan turned to face him, his expression quickly shifting from warmth to guardedness. "What do you want, Mark?" Nathan replied, his tone flat, irritation simmering beneath the surface. "Oh, just thought I'd drop by and see how my favorite loser is doing," Mark said, circling Nathan like a predator. "Heard you're playing house now. Got yourself a nice little family, huh?" Lillian's breath caught in her throat as she stepped closer, straining to hear their conversation. She could see Nathan's jaw tighten, the old defensiveness creeping back into his demeanor. "Cut it out, Mark. I'm not in the mood for your games," Nathan said, his voice low but firm. Games? I'm just here to remind you of where you came from, Mark taunted, his eyes glinting with malice. Remember the nights we spent chasing highs? You think this little shelter gig is going to save you? It's just a matter of time before you slip back into your old ways. Lillian felt her heart race as she watched Nathan's expression darken, the tension in the air thickening. She knew Nathan had struggled with addiction, and Mark's words were a dangerous reminder of his past. Lillian stepped forward, unable to remain a silent observer any longer. "Why don't you just leave him alone, Mark?" she interjected, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. "He's trying to build a life for himself." Mark turned to her, surprise flickering across his features. "Oh, look at that. The rich girl is sticking up for the poor boy. How charming. But you don't know him like I do. He's still that same guy who couldn't keep his life together." "Things change, Mark. People change," Lillian replied, her voice rising with frustration. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" Nathan stepped closer to her, gratitude shining in his eyes. "Lillian, it's okay," he said softly, but she could hear the strain in his voice. "No, it's not okay. You can't just come in here and threaten everything he's worked for," she insisted, her protective instincts roaring to the surface. Mark scoffed, his smile taunting. "Worked for? You mean pretending to be a good father while hiding from the truth? You think this little act of charity makes him a saint? Wait until the past catches up with him. It always does." Lillian's heart pounded in her chest, sensing the stakes rising. She could see Nathan's expression shift, the flicker of doubt creeping in. "What do you mean?" Nathan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mark leaned in, relishing the moment. "You really don't know, do you? You think you've got a handle on this new life, but the truth is, you're just one slip away from losing everything." "Stop it!" Lillian shouted, feeling the tension spiral out of control. "What are you talking about?" "Let's just say I know things about you, Nathan. Things that could ruin your little happy ending here," Mark taunted, taking a step back as he reveled in the chaos he was causing. "Enough!" Nathan shouted, his face flushed with anger. "I'm done with you, Mark. I'm not that person anymore." "Are you sure?" "Because I have a feeling you're one bad day away from proving me right," Mark replied, smirking as he turned to walk away, leaving behind a lingering sense of dread. As he disappeared into the crowd, Lillian turned to Nathan, her heart aching at the turmoil etched on his face. "Nathan, don't listen to him. You've come so far. You're not that person anymore. I see who you are now." Nathan shook his head, frustration boiling over. "You don't understand, Lillian. The past doesn't just disappear. It's always there, waiting to catch up with you. But you're here now, and you're trying," she urged, desperation creeping into her voice. "You're a good person, and you're making a difference. Don't let him get to you." He looked away, lost in thought, and she could feel the intensity of his struggle. "What if I can't escape it?" he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. Lillian reached out, placing a hand on his arm, grounding him in the moment. "You won't. You have me, and you have this community. We can face it together." Nathan looked into her eyes, searching for something hope, understanding, perhaps even love. But the weight of doubt still held him captive. "I don't want to drag you down with me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're not dragging me down. I'm choosing to be here," she replied firmly, her heart racing. "You mean something to me, Nathan. You have to believe that." He drew in a shaky breath, the tension between them palpable. "I don't want to lose you again," he admitted, vulnerability slipping through his facade. "Then don't," she urged, her heart aching for him. "Let's keep moving forward, together. We can build something new." But as they stood there amidst the crowd, a shadow loomed over their fragile connection. The revelation that Mark had hinted at hung between them, an unspoken threat that could shatter the world they were trying to create. Just then, the sound of applause erupted nearby as a guest took the stage to thank everyone for their support. Lillian blinked, momentarily distracted by the noise, but when she turned back, she saw Nathan's expression shift again. "Lillian, he started, but she could see the walls building back up around him. The fear in his eyes was unmistakable, and she knew the battle within him was far from over. "Whatever it is, we can face it together," she repeated, squeezing his hand tightly. But Nathan pulled away slightly, the distance between them growing. "I need some air," he said abruptly, turning to leave the room. "Wait, Nathan." Lillian called after him, but he was already disappearing into the throng of guests. Panic rose in her chest as she watched him go, uncertainty flooding her mind. What had Mark said that could unravel everything? What secrets lay buried in Nathan's past that could threaten their fragile bond? With determination surging through her, Lillian took a deep breath and followed him into the crowd, her heart set on finding him again, on reminding him that they were stronger together than apart. As she navigated through the sea of faces, she couldn't shake the feeling that the night once filled with hope was now teetering on the edge of chaos, and she was desperate to pull it back from the brink. As sun began to set over New York City, casting a warm golden hue across the skyline, Nathan found himself standing outside the shelter, wrestling with his thoughts. The noise of the bustling city faded into the background as he contemplated his next move. He had come so far, but the weight of his past was suffocating. The revelation of his connection to Samuel, the child he had been caring for, had injected a fresh wave of fear into his heart. He thought he was doing the right thing by distancing himself from Lillian, he believed it was for her own good. "Maybe it's time to let go," he whispered to himself, his voice cracking under the pressure of his emotions. The cold wind brushed against his skin, and he shivered, not just from the chill but from the clarity that gripped him. He believed he was a danger to her, a poison seeping into her life. With a heavy heart, he turned to leave. At that very moment, Lillian was racing through the streets, her heels clicking against the pavement, urgency fueling her every step. She had felt something shift within her during the event at the shelter, a stirring of emotions she couldn't quite define. But when Nathan had walked away, her heart dropped. It was as if a piece of her soul was tethered to him, and she couldn't let him go without a fight. "Nathan," she called out, her voice cutting through the evening air. He stopped but didn't turn around. The tension in his shoulders was palpable, and Lillian's heart raced faster. "Please, just listen to me." She approached him cautiously, the distance between them feeling like a chasm. "Don't walk away." "I can't do this, Lillian," he said, finally turning to face her, his eyes filled with pain. "I can't put you in danger. I'm not the man you once knew. I'm a mess." "Maybe you're right, but I can't just let you go," she insisted, desperation lacing her words. "You're not just a mess, you're a father now. And I believe you can be better. We can face this together." Nathan shook his head, his expression hardening. "You don't understand. The past. It'll always be there, and I'm afraid of dragging you into it. You deserve better than a guy like me. What if I told you that I'm not just here for you?" Lillian took a deep breath, her resolve strengthening. "What if I told you that I'm here for Samuel too?" The mention of the baby's name made Nathan falter. "What do you mean?" "Samuel. He's our son, Nathan." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken truths. Nathan's breath caught in his throat. "What? That's impossible. We didn't even dash." "We did," she interrupted, her voice firm. "Remember the night before everything fell apart? We were together, and it wasn't just a mistake. It was real." His mind raced back to that night, the warmth of her body beside him, the laughter, the passion. But the dark clouds of their separation had overshadowed those memories. "Are you sure? How can you be certain?" he asked, hope flickering in his chest. I went to the doctor after the divorce. I didn't know how to tell you, Lillian confessed, tears welling in her eyes. I thought you wouldn't want anything to do with me, with our child. I was scared. Nathan's heart sank. And you kept this from me all this time? I didn't know how to find you, she replied, her voice breaking. But now, standing here with you, I can't keep it hidden anymore. I don't want to hide from you or from him. Silence enveloped them as Nathan processed the revelation. The idea of being a father, of having a family, ignited something within him, a flicker of hope. Samuel is my son. Yes, she nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. And I know this is a lot to take in, but we can do this together. We can be a family. Nathan's eyes softened, the walls he had built around his heart beginning to crumble. I thought I was protecting you. I thought leaving was the best choice. But it wasn't, Lillian countered, stepping closer, her heart racing. You don't have to protect me from you, Nathan. I'm not afraid of you. I'm afraid of losing you again. I've lost so much already. His gaze dropped to the ground, conflicted emotions swirling inside him. I don't even know if I'm fit to be a father. What if I mess this up? Every parent feels that way, she replied gently. But we can learn together. We can support each other. You're not alone in this anymore. Slowly, he lifted his eyes to meet hers, searching for the truth in her expression. You really mean that? I do, she affirmed, her voice steady. I believe in you, Nathan. And I believe in us. The air felt charged with unspoken possibilities. The weight of his past still pressed upon him, but the vision of a future with Lillian and Samuel began to take shape. Okay, he finally said, a tentative smile breaking through his uncertainty. Let's try. Let's be a family. Tears streamed down Lillian's cheeks, but they were tears of relief and joy. We'll figure it out together. I promise. As they stood there, the sun sinking behind the horizon, Nathan reached out, taking her hands in his. I never stopped loving you, you know, he confessed, his voice barely a whisper. Not for a single day. I never stopped loving you either, she admitted, her heart swelling with emotion. We have a chance to start fresh, Nathan. For Samuel. He nodded, the warmth of her hands grounding him in the moment. For Samuel. With that, they turned to walk back towards the shelter together, ready to face the challenges ahead. The road would be long, and there would be hurdles to overcome, but as they stepped into the threshold of their new beginning, Nathan felt a sense of peace wash over him. In that moment, they both understood that love could heal even the deepest wounds, and together, they would rewrite their story, one filled with hope, redemption, and the promise of a brighter future.